Hey, what's up? Today I'm gonna be making a little sofa table. It's gonna go behind our couch. So the first thing I need to do is to measure my current couch to see what dimensions I'm gonna make the little table. It's basically just kind of like a little accent table. It's just gonna go back there. All right, so I went ahead and took the measurements of what I need. It, I'm not an artist by any means, so but this is ideally what it's gonna end up looking like. Hopefully you can see that it's very basic shape. I'll probably taper the legs. I don't think I'm gonna do too much to it. Since I don't have a lathe, I can't turn the wood and do some kind of design on it, so I'm just probably gonna taper the legs just to give it some sort of aesthetic appeal. It's gonna be 32.5 inches in height. That sits just below the very top of my couch. It's gonna be 6 inches in width, so it'll be from the wall to the couch. It'll probably be 6 inches, and then the length is going to be 6 feet. That's just a little bit narrower from the width of the couch. Alright, so this is the stuff you're going to need for the build. This is a 1x6 by 8 feet. This is a 1x4 by 8 feet. And these two are 2x2s. These are pine, so these are the most expensive ones. These were, I believe, $11 each. This was about another $5, and this was at about another $6. So all in all, about close to about 30 something dollars for this. All right, so first I started off by measuring the legs based on the height and the dimensions that I had taken earlier. Turned out to be about, since the overall height was going to be about 32.5, I ended up making the legs 31 3/4 to take into account the 3/4 inch thickness of the top piece. And here, this is the actual top piece. What I ended up doing is basically cutting off just one of the ends. That way I made sure it was squared. And then after that, I pretty much just measured it up to the length that I was looking for, which was going to be 6 feet exactly. And then just use my square to make sure it's perfectly squared, and then just cut it with the miter saw. Alright, these are going to be the side rail pieces that I'm cutting. I'm taking the measurements, taking into account the size of the 2x2s that are going to be the legs, and then I'm just cutting it down to size. That way it's a little bit more manageable for when I run it through the table saw. It's not that long of a board to run through the table saw. And here I'm just kind of running it through. I pretty much just measured the width of the board and then kind of did somewhat a little bit less than half of the size. That way I can have two perfectly even side rails for the table. And then here I'm just running the other piece through to make sure it's the same width as the first one. And then I end up running this little small piece through, which is going to be for the sides of the table that I still need to make. I still need to make it to the appropriate width to match the other side rails for the front and back. And those that I just cut were the side ones. Then after that, it's pretty much just a bunch of sanding. Really, it's just do it with sand it with 120, and then after I finish sanding everything with 120, I pretty much end up going back and sanding everything up with 220 at that point. Here I'm doing the glue up. Pretty much, this is my first time using the Type Bond 2, I think, as the one with the red labeling. I've always used the Type Bond 3, the one that's waterproof, but I notice if you use it with light colored wood, it does leave a black glue up mark on the piece. So this was my first time using this yellow glue, still by Type Bond, but just the one with the red label on there. And I know that one's waterproof as well, but I believe from what I've heard other people say, it doesn't leave that black line that the green one leaves, which is the one I've always been using. So nothing really complicated here. I'm pretty much just gluing up the side rails and then just tacking them in with the brad nails. And I believe I'm using an 1.25 inch brad nail
to go in through the top, and then going into the side pieces, and I pretty much just brad nail everything in with the glue, using the clamps for reinforcements to make sure the rails aren't bowing in or out, kind of keeping everything lined up. So this was my first attempt at trying to do the tapered legs. I've never done it before, and I've seen jigs of people building the jigs to make the tapered legs, but I didn't really have that much scrap material left over. This was like some old MDF particle board that I had there. If you can kind of see it, it's all spray painted. And all I did was pick a random angle, and I ended up screwing in some 2x4 pallet scraps that I had left over that I pretty much squared up prior to on the miter saw. So that way I had a flat edge on one of them, and then I rested up the leg up against it, so that way I'd make sure that it would sit flush with it. At the end of the sled, you probably can't see it from here, but I ended up putting like a little rail piece, so that way I didn't have to worry about the legs sliding out past the end point. And like I said, this was just a random angle. You can kind of see I'm actually surprised it actually did work, but luckily I didn't lose any fingers or anything like that. So I still made sure that I, kept my hands away from the blade as much as possible while still trying to hold on to the sled and the piece. And pretty much just back to sanding again, sanding everything, trying to get rid of those saw marks. And then I did decide to use one 2-inch screw basically to go in through the for the legs. That way it's a little bit more supported, so they are screwed in. I always pre-drill everything, so I pre-drilled the top piece to go into the leg, and then I end up screwing in the 2-inch screw with the wood glue into the leg, and that pretty much was enough to hold up the legs in place without them going all over the place. The other thing I also had trouble with is because the top board, the 1x6, because it wasn't it had like a cup or a bow in it, so it wasn't completely flat, and since I don't have a router, there wasn't going to be any way for me to flatten it. So what I ended up doing is using those side pieces I had cut earlier. I made them just a little bit. I pretty much made them to where they were a tight fit up against the legs and between the legs. That way, it would help me with the keeping the tapered legs straight. You can kind of see them at the end of the table where they're kind of stretched out. If I didn't have that side rail and I just cut it to where it fit in there without being a tight fit, the legs would have been bowing inwards, just because of the severity of the tabletop being, having a bow in it or a cup. Of course, you wouldn't have that issue if I would have had a planer. I wouldn't have that issue. I would just plane it down to where it was perfectly flat, and the legs would sit perfectly straight without me having to reinforce it with that side rail. And on this side, I mean, it's the same thing as the first. I'm pretty much just screwing them in and gluing them up, and then pretty much painting everything, going with a flat black to match the rest of the furniture that we have. That's pretty much it. Nothing really to it. So thanks again for watching, and enjoy the pics.